Hey, everybody, please subscribe, like, and share.
Okay, Chris Peaks here back tonight with my friend Chris for our weekly Civil War talks, and gonna touch on one tonight that I'm not really well versed in, and probably a lot of people aren't either. What else happened on day two at Gettysburg besides the little round top? Chris, how are you, man?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So, um, you know, that's all we hear about. Chamberlain's defense, little round top, and
Mhm.
15th Alabama. But what else happened that day? I mean, because there was an echelon attack, I believe.
Yeah. Well, before I even get into that, I have to, as a as a point of order, um, just say that it wasn't Chamberlain alone defending Little Round Top, and
Oh,
we always think of Chamberlain defending it because
right.
between the Killer Angels and this and Ken Burns' Civil War and the film Gettysburg, that's all we ever see. But remember, Chamberlain's commanding one regiment. Little Round Top was defended by 2 brigades and a supernumerary regiment and a battery of artillery. 20th is just part of that. Vincent's entire brigade is up there, of which Chamberlain formed the left flank. There are 4 other regiments. And then, of course, Weed's brigade and Patty O'Rourke's 140th New York. They're all up there. And Hazlitt's artillery battery. Weed, Hazlitt, Vincent, they're all going to die up there. Vincent will die in a hospital, but distinction without difference.
Chamberlain did so well of marketing himself that's why he's.
Yeah, I think so. Gelzo makes that point, and I should mention it's a very controversial book, The Last Invasion. A lot of old hats don't like it because it challenges the historiography so effectively. Personally, I love the book, but a lot of my thoughts on Gettysburg are derived from Gettysburg, The Last Invasion. So if you're one of the folks listening to this and you don't like that book, you're not going to like anything I have to say. But Gelzo makes the point that realistically, Chamberlain had frankly good publicist, and he was one of the highest ranking officers to survive. O'Rourke dies, Vincent dies, Weed dies, Hazlitt dies. Actually, quite tragically, Weed and Hazlitt were extremely close and considered to be best friends by most folks who knew them. And when Hazlitt was hit, Weed ran over to his friend and leaned over Hazlitt to hear his last words. And while he was leaning there, he was struck by a rebel ball, which killed him. But anyway, it wasn't just Chamberlain defending Little Round Top. That being said, and I having explored the ground myself, I'm in complete agreement with Gelzo on this. Little Round Top, it's exaggerated. And I think it's because it's a fantastic story. And Chamberlain, in his memoirs, told it extremely well. And Chamberlain, it's important to remember that Chamberlain, at the end of his life, he was really facing pretty severe poverty. And he was too proud to ask for money. So the only way to really support himself was to write about his war accounts. And as there's more space between the Civil War and the modern era, you start getting more and more tabloid publications about it that become increasingly lurid. And some of the more absurd elements of Chamberlain's recollections come from editing, which he didn't approve of, and totally reinvented his words. One of the famous examples being Chamberlain seeing a dog standing alone in Fredericksburg amidst all the fighting. And there's this whole soliloquy in the publication about this dog. Chamberlain wrote them saying, "There was no fucking dog. What are you talking about?" So you got to kind of feel bad for Chamberlain. I don't think it was opportunism on his part. I think it was kind of forced into the position to have to sign off on a lot of lies. Nevertheless, his story is quite incredible, and so it captures public imagination. But it wasn't just Chamberlain. Chamberlain was fighting 2 regiments of a huge Confederate attacking force, and he was part of 2 brigades defending Little Round Top. But Round Top itself has been exaggerated. Have you ever been on Little Round Top?
No, I haven't. I was going to go this summer, and I still want to get up there, but I haven't.
You should.
Definitely plans yet.
It's a perfect observation post. You can see the entire Federal line. Oh, really can. First time I was up there, I thought that this confirmed everything about the battle, that it would have been the perfect position. Then I read Gelzo and explored it again in 2017, and I could see the problems. The Little Round Top is extremely spiny as a ridge. So you would have difficulty deploying a single battery on Little Round Top effectively. Your next problem is Civil War artillery. Even rifle artillery is notoriously inaccurate, and that's because of black powder. Black powder, the volume that actually detonates per charge is not consistent, no matter how measured you are. And in a battle, you don't have to have time for precise measurement. And it produces an extraordinary amount of smoke, which means it's impossible to actually validate your hits. So you can aim at a target, but whether or not you're hitting it, you don't know. Which means if you've missed the first shot, you'll miss the consecutive shots as well. And on this ridge that's spiny, you'd be lucky to put one battery of 4 guns. 4 guns is not going to make an army of 90,000 retreat. And your other problem is it's a very steep hill. Civil War artillery is at its best at a 1% inclination on ground. And if you go to a place like the Round Top where the inclination is more like 8%, you can't de-elevate the guns enough to actually aim at your target. So the idea that they could, it'd be totally ineffective. And as a demonstration of this, I forget the man who was commanding Hazlitt's artillery on the 3rd day because Hazlitt was busy being dead, but he wanted to fire at the Confederates moving across the Katori farm in Pickett's charge. And he was told initially by General Hunt in no uncertain terms, there's no point in firing because you literally cannot hit them from where we are. Now, that's the Katori farm. That's right beside the lines on Cemetery Ridge, which to me pretty effectively demonstrates they couldn't hit Cemetery Ridge. Incidentally, his reason for firing was, wow, I know we won't hit our target. The sound of our guns will moralize our troops and demoralize the enemy. Hunt said, well, that's a good enough reason. Go ahead. But every shot missed. So artillery up on Little Round Top is useless. It's a good signal position. It's a good observation post. If it wasn't so spiny, maybe you could use it as a point to launch an infantry attack. But realistically, I don't think the battle rests on it. Now, Lee's plan of attack was non-echelon attack. And to understand Lee's plan, we have to understand the context of the battle. And this is where I have to wag my finger at one of my favorite movies, Gettysburg. In Gettysburg, in the early scene in Act 2 of the film, the Confederates describe the entire Federal position as a fishhook, show you the map, and describe that there are 5 corps at Gettysburg. They didn't know any of that on day 2. As far as they were aware, there were 2 corps at Gettysburg, 1st and 11th. They had been mauled seriously the first day. This is, by the way, why the orders to Ewell on the night of the first day are so vague. Ewell doesn't know, should I take Cemetery Hill, which you should. And Lee's orders are, you can take the hill if practicable, but do not bring on a general engagement, which Ewell crumples up. I think I told you before. He crumples up the order and basically responds, is there not anyone on Lee's staff that can write a goddamn military dispatch? Because that is gobbledygook. What does that mean? What's a general engagement? What does bringing on one mean? Can I commit a regiment? What about 2? How about a brigade? At what point is it a general engagement? And do you want me to take it or not? I think what Lee is basically saying there translates to, dude, if there's no one on the hill, go for it. But I don't want a serious fight over this. And that's because Lee believes tomorrow I am going to send my boys up that hill and they're going to kill those people up there because there's only 2 corps. Then we will form on that hill and the rest of the Federal Corps will arrive piecemeal and we'll destroy them piece by piece. It's exactly what he describes to Trimble. It's remarkably similar to what he describes to Davis in private and to his wife in his letters to Mary.
In Gettysburg, remember that didn't they say when they're describing that, he said we believe there's 70,000 men already in place and maybe as high as 90.
Yeah, they don't know that. They don't know any of that. The plan wouldn't have been executed as it was. Lee is planning to attack 2 corps. His on-echelon attack, the entire purpose of an on-echelon attack is to deny your opponent the ability to move troops to point of concentration, right? So you attack one point on their flank And then as they begin to move troops, you attack the next point. And the idea basically is they will either move troops quickly if they are truly afraid of losing that flank and thereby weaken their center or their opposite flank, which your successive attack will break. Or if the attacks are perfectly coordinated, they will be unable to move troops. And the result will be one of those positions will break under pressure. The problem with non-echelon attack is, to steal the phrase from Gelzo, you have to have ice in your veins because the initial attacking units will suffer severe casualties. Now, Lee is thinking I'm attacking 2 federal corps, both of which have been severely mauled yesterday. Now I have Longstreet's corps to lead the attack. And contrary to popular belief, Longstreet was one of the best attackers in Lee's army. So, and if you don't believe me, my question to you is, who launched the attack at Second Manassas? So Longstreet is going to lead one of his extraordinary infantry offensives. And Longstreet will say of this day, it was the best 3 hours fighting of any man in any battlefield. And I mean, Longstreet was incredibly egotistical, but you know what? He's kind of got a point. The Confederate attack on the second day at Gettysburg is one of the most successful infantry assaults of the Confederates in the Civil War.
Really?
Oh, think about it. What happens to the Third Corps?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. What happens to what now?
What happens to the Federal Third Corps?
That's a good point.
It's annihilated.
Totally.
What happens to the Second Corps? Brutally mauled. What happens to 11 and First Corps? It's an incredible offensive. Jackson's attack at Chancellorsville did not defeat a single corps.
Right.
The attack on the second day of Gettysburg is infinitely more successful than Jackson's flank attack at Chancellorsville. The difference is, in the memory of the battle, the Confederates win Chancellorsville. And the attack by Jackson is the climax. Therefore, the attack is remembered as being a great success.
So
Longstreet's attack on day 2, objectively, is far more successful than Jackson the second day of Chancellorsville.
In the movie, you remember when they meet up and Lee says, or Sheen says, it was very close today. I could feel him breaking, and then Longstreet says it wasn't that close.
Yeah.
Who was it close?
It was extremely close. It was desperately close. It was so close that the Confederacy might have won that day. And I don't mean the battle. I mean the whole war. The second day at Gettysburg is one of the most dramatic moments of the entire Civil War. They come terrifyingly close to winning. They don't, thank God. But good Lord, they come close. Sorry?
Where was the breaking point all across go ahead and finish explaining the attack. I think he was getting into it. I was just very interesting.
I'll try to tell it. I'm going to make a lot of omissions, and I'm sure I'll make mistakes. But I'll try my best from what I know.
I think, yeah.
So the Confederates launched the attack. Now, here's where it gets funny. Initially, the plan is to flank South Cemetery Ridge. You know Cemetery Ridge, of course, right? So this is the left end of Cemetery Ridge. Now, before the attack, Lee dispatches Captain Samuel R. Johnston, a man who history has been surprisingly kind to. Johnston is a scout, and Johnston's purpose is to scout the Federal position. He climbs up Little Round Top, according to Johnston, and he observes the Federal line and reports there are no Federal troops on the southern portion of Cemetery Ridge. While he is saying this, according to the Federal timeline of the battle, there were 30,000 men where he was staring. There were also a signal corps on Little Round Top, which apparently he failed to say hello to. The best theory I have encountered on this is Sam climbed the wrong hill. Here's the best part. There were 4 enlisted soldiers in the Army of Northern Virginia who had been born and raised in Gettysburg.
Really?
And somehow At no point did anyone say, "Oh, you know how that's Culp's Hill? Yeah. Well, John Culp is right here. Maybe we could ask him."
I did
It
not know
never
that.
comes up. Yeah, John Culp is one example. He's in Allegheny Johnson's division. And his name is no coincidence. He was born and raised on Culp's Hill. Then he became a tutor, was hired by a slave-owning family in Virginia, tutored their children, fell in love with the South, and when the Civil War came, threw his lot in with the Confederacy, found himself in the Confederate Army, and on July 3rd, he would march up the ancestral hill that bore his name, not in defense of it, but to attack it. And on that hill, he would fight, and on that hill where he was born, he would die that day.
I did not know that story.
In an invading army. You ever heard of the Went House?
No.
The Went House is an important position on the federal left that the Confederates take early on. One of the Went sons, who was in an artillery battery in the ANV, decided to pay a visit to his father, ask how he was doing. And this happens with a lot of frequency. But there are 4 Confederates from Gettysburg, and somehow none of them are asked to scout the position.
That is amazing. 4 grew up in Gettysburg, and none of them.
Yeah, none of them are asked. Do you want to maybe play some kind of role? Do you want to maybe play some kind of role in our reconnaissance? It's a huge mistake.
I mean, I'm just trying to wrap my mind around that, because I know Gettysburg obviously was not a huge place and have people. I mean, that's 4 of them.
Yeah,
from that city.
Oh, it's incredible.
That little
town. In the Confederate Army.
Yeah, in the Confederate Army, in that little town.
It's just extraordinary.
It's amazing. I mean,
but what's truly extraordinary is none of them were asked to assist in reconnaissance.
I'm exactly like the little town that I come from, Locust Fork, and I'm trying to 4 people ended up in that one battle. I mean, that's just amazing.
Yeah,
to wrap your mind around it. And not one.
You want further irony? The vast majority of the vast majority of Gettysburg residents who enlisted for the battle. Enlisted for the war, actually missed the Battle of Gettysburg.
Huh.
Because they're in the army, the Susquehanna. So they're in the wrong place. They're near Harrisburg. Anyway, what are you going to do? But where were we in this rambling story I'm telling you?
We was talking about
Captain Johnston.
I'm going to have to look him up later and read more about John Culp, because that's just...
fascinating fellow. And look up Captain Samuel R. Johnston as well.
Okay. So
Johnston, he probably just climbed the wrong hill, which is, when you get down to it, incredibly funny. And at least if you're like me and you're dyed in the wool Union blue, it's really funny. So Lee's intelligence is there's around 20,000 Confederates up there. Actually, it's more like 60. And Lee's plan in that context makes sense. I'm going to start pressuring their left. They'll start collapsing. They'll try to send reinforcement. The second they try to send reinforcement, my succeeding brigades will strike them piece by piece on echelon, and then the left flank will break. And when it does, those brigades will be fresh and ready to convert to a flanking attack. We'll sweep them up the hill, wrap up the 1st and 11th in a nice, clean, crisp attack, and then we're going to wait for the next corps to arrive, and we'll gobble them up.
I mean, it sounds great.
It's a fantastic plan on paper. The only problem is it's based on intelligence that is completely wrong. So when Longstreet, now meanwhile, General Meade is planning in his defense, which is significantly more core than expected. He doesn't like Dan Sickles. In fairness, I can't imagine any human being who is decent who would like Dan Sickles. I mean, he's a disgusting little man. And his decision, I'm very sympathetic to. he decides, I am going to put Dan Sickles as far away as humanly possible from me so I don't have to deal with him and his rampant stupidity. So he places Sickles on the extreme left. This will be a truly unfortunate mistake. And you know what Sickles, of course, does, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Sickles is placed on South Cemetery Ridge. He uses his binoculars and discovers, to his extraordinary surprise, that Devil's Den and the Peach Orchard are technically at a higher elevation. Assuming that General Meade, being, of course, an idiot with no military experience, hadn't noticed this, he decides that's the superior ground. So he asks General Hunt, should I advance? Now, General Hunt has been told by General Meade, you need to stay where you are. And General Hunt's answer is, well, yes, that is technically higher ground, but you'd be totally exposed and vulnerable to a flank attack. So it would be a terrible idea. And Sickles took that as, yes.
Didn't he receive a court martial or something later on after the war?
Incredibly, no, he should have. He should have probably been executed by firing squad. But he advanced his corps moronically into the Devil's Den and the Peach Orchard, and Hancock was seeing this happen. And they advanced wonderfully. And he turned to one of his staff officers and said, they advanced in a pretty way, but give them 10 minutes and they'll come tumbling back. And that's because they're now a salient. They're an exposed thumb. It's the worst possible position you can maintain, very easily flanked. Now, he advances. Meanwhile, General Longstreet is preparing to attack. Now, Longstreet asks Lee if he can delay the attack from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. in order to allow Evander Law's brigade to move into position. They were still marching up. This is a very important.
What you said, he asked if he could delay the attack from 9 o'clock to 11 o'clock.
That's right. Now,
what time do you think? What time do you think that Longstreet got his orders to begin at 9?
Well, here's the beauty of it. Lee's response is, that's fine. The entire lost cause narrative of the Battle of Gettysburg is that damned idiot Longstreet didn't follow his orders and delayed the attack until it was too late. General Lee said, go ahead.
What time do you think Lee told him, all right, start to attack it? You're going to start at 9. You think he told him at 8, 7:30?
I don't know the exact time, but early in the morning.
See, the reason I'm asking is I have people tell me all the time, well, Longstreet didn't get his orders to attack till 11, till 1 o'clock. I was like, that makes no sense. I was like, they met early that morning. You can't tell me that Lee waited 6 hours to order to attack.
From my understanding of the battle, that tracks though, because the orders are they're preemptory orders, but Lee modifies them when Longstreet requests him to, because he wants Hood and McLaws divisions in their totality. And Lee says that's fine.
Total system.
Now, Lee says that because he's not in a hurry. And why is he not in a hurry? How does he understand the battle? What does he think he's facing up there?
He still thinks he's facing 2 corps.
Exactly. So why rush?
Because Stuart would have reported, right?
Well, Stuart wouldn't have, because cavalry does not reconnoiter the tactical deployments of an enemy army. Cavalry is in charge of observing the operational movements of an army, which is also why it's absurd to blame Stuart for this defeat, because Lee does every single thing. If we assume that Trimble's account is accurate, and in fairness, there was some distance there, but Trimble was very insistent. Remember, word for word, and this does track with what Lee told both Davis and his wife in private correspondence. Lee's plan was to seek out the Federal Army, draw it into battle, and destroy it in detail, corps by corps. And that's precisely what he's doing at this point. So if General Stuart gave him the same intelligence that Harrison did, on what planet would that change Lee's plan? Stuart is not in charge of tactical reconnaissance. That's the job of scouts. And there's no reason to believe he would have selected someone other than Samuel R. Johnston. So for what reason should we assume that anything would have been different?
I totally agree with you now, because the one thing I like to point out to people when they talk about the cavalry, I'm like, look, he sent scouts out after dark on the first night to look for Stuart. So If they were good enough to do that, they were good enough to scout ahead.
Yeah, and he wanted to find Stewart. I mean, call him crazy, but it's kind of nice to have your cavalry when you're going into a major battle. But it is not the role of cavalry to reconnoiter an enemy's tactical deployment. So Stewart, at this point, his role would have already changed from being from scouting enemy deployment to operating against the enemy. So Stewart becomes a scapegoat.
I hate how he's a scapegoat for that.
So anyway, where was I? So Lee, he feels fairly confident in telling Longstreet, yeah, take your time, no rush, for understandable reasons. And now I'm gonna try to synchronize my timelines, and hopefully it'll start making sense why I told you all of this. So when Longstreet finally advances, what's he gonna find as he advances towards South Cemetery Ridge?
Oh, when he has to do his countermark, he finds the
because he's gonna find Sickles, because Sickles advanced his position. South Cemetery Ridge is supposed to be clear. Not only is it very occupied, a federal corps has advanced 500 meters beyond it. So Longstreet has to countermarch. Now, Sickles, moronically, will go on to pretend in the character of Historicus, publishing a true objective account of Gettysburg, that he personally realized Longstreet's plan and operated to deny him the initiative. Bullshit. What he did is he exposed his corps unnecessarily and suffered for it. But and sort of this man. Longstreet redeploys and attacks. Now, while this is happening, before the attack begins, Meade is informed that Sickles has taken it upon his own initiative to redeploy the Army of the Potomac. And we all know that Meade was a very calm, passive, patient man. It's not like he had a reputation for being one of the angriest men in the entire army. So he's not exactly thrilled when he finds out. And this produces one of my favorite lines of the battle, where after berating Sickles quite viciously for the stupidity of his movement, Sickles meekly responds, "But General, we're on higher ground." And Meade, at this point, probably having a small aneurysm, says, "Yes, General, you are on higher ground. And if you move further north, you'll find higher ground still. And if you keep advancing, you will find the Blue Ridge Mountains." His point being, buddy, the height of the ground doesn't matter. You might want to be connected to the army. At this point, Sickles says, "General, I will withdraw my corps if you desire." And as if on cue, Confederate skirmishers begin to fire and exchange fire with the 2nd USS. At which point, Meade responds, "I don't think General Lee is going to let you."
That's classic.
And this defines the battle. He'll start feeding in brigades from the 2nd Corps and 5th Corps to support 3rd Corps, as 3rd Corps quickly dissolves. And this is going to create the maelstrom of the wheat field and the peach orchard. I don't know if you know this, but the wheat field, with respect to its geographic space, is real estate. It is the bloodiest section of ground of the entire Civil War. There is no other comparable section that is equal to the size of the wheat field that had as many casualties. It's insane. It's just a bloody maelstrom.
Wasn't that a Minnesota regiment received 87% casualties?
Not quite. That's actually on Cemetery Ridge. I'm getting to that part.
Okay. Well, is that the same one where there was like a Confederate company that received 100% casualties?
That's on the 3rd day. That's on the 3rd day. That's
okay.
the University Grays. And at Pickett's Charge, they suffer 100% losses.
Okay.
So anyway, I'm belaboring the point, so I'll speed up the story. As the fighting goes on, finally General Barksdale is unleashed, and his Mississippians make a very famous charge, where they manage to break through the peach orchard, and they look like they're going to finally attack South Cemetery Ridge. At this point, Hancock is ordered to send his, quote, best brigade to repulse them. Oh, sorry, not Hancock. Well, Hancock orders General Ayres to choose his best brigade in his division. Ayres turns to Colonel Willard and says, quote, Colonel Willard, take your cowards into the field and knock the hell out of the Rebs. The cowards in question are the Harper's Ferry cowards. Willard's brigade was amongst the 20-odd thousand men who were forced to surrender in Harper's Ferry during the Maryland campaign. Ashamed which they hadn't recovered from. Their morale had been incredibly low, and General Ayres, sorry, not Ayres, Hayes. Final answer, Hayes. General Hayes had made that brigade one of his little pet projects, and he had spent 8 months rejuvenating them, making them an elite crack unit, and this was their chance. And so they hurled themselves against Barksdale, shouting at the top of their lungs, Harper's Ferry, Harper's Ferry, Harper's Ferry. And they did it. They drove those rebels right back. Unfortunately, Willard would have his head knocked off by a Confederate shell and would never actually get to enjoy that moment. But they drove them back. But then they start receiving heavy casualties and fall back. It is at this point that at last the Union extreme left is beginning to collapse. This is the same time, by the way, Oates' Alabama Brigade it's not Oates' actually, it's Law's Alabama Brigade, but Law takes command of the division when McLaws is wounded, and so Oates takes command of the brigade. But Law's Alabama Brigade, with a couple of Texans, makes its attack on Little Round Top. That's happening. I'm not going to get into it because, well, I've already explained why I'm not going to get into it, but that's happening.
That was we still have those as National Guard units, the 4th and 14th Alabama.
There you go.
Sorry. Hey, let me ask you one question. Barksdale's attack. I read this great article one time. It was called Longstreet's Pit Bull. And it said all afternoon Barksdale was pulling on the lead, wanting to go in. Longstreet, holding him back. Yeah. Barksdale went in on horseback.
Yes, he did.
And was killed. How much did his attack or him being killed affect the attack, or did it affect it at all?
I mean,
demoralize his men.
I don't feel like I know enough to answer that conclusively. I think whenever you lose your commanding officer, it's necessarily a disaster, unless it's like your commander officer is like Ledley or Roger Pryor. Like unless you have a real moron in charge, it's inherently a disaster. But I think his brigade was already wavering, and frankly, the attack they made was extraordinary. I mean, they're only human,
right?
But the exact impact, I mean, the thing that question fundamentally breaks down to: how aware are they that their commander has been knocked out of action? And if I've learned anything from reading Civil War memoirs, is they have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
And how could they?
Yeah, I said that kind of. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. You ever read how he lived like 12 hours or something? I was reading where he was drinking water and it would come through the hole in his chest.
Oh, Barksdale?
Yeah.
He survived for 12 hours?
He survived for almost through the night. And there was a surgeon that came to see about him, and he was, the clerk said he was mortally wounded. And Barksdale, they was giving him water, and the hole in his chest was so big the water would come out. And he was defiant to the end, telling them Lee would be in their rear, rolling up their flanks any minute now, and right up until he died. Yeah, but he survived.
That sounds about right for Barksdale. I think was it James McPherson who described it? It's so funny. And he was talking about Fredericksburg and the defense of Fredericksburg from the Engineer Corps when Lee was establishing land on Myers Heights and along Prospect Hill, where he said, I think it was McPherson who said, General Barksdale finally got his wish to fight the entire Federal Army. Which I suspect is exactly what he wanted. He died. Anyway, so Barksdale's down, Willard's down. At this point, and I skipped a lot, but soon. The Catamus Wilcox leads his Alabama Brigade to attack Cemetery Ridge. Now, at last, the battle is sort of happening the way Lee wanted.
Where's Lee observing this from?
I forget what the Widow Glenn's house.
Okay.
I want to say.
I don't know if he was bouncing back and forth or he's just.
Well, Lee doesn't have any command and control at this point, and that's because Lee is smart. One of his Prussian observers, Ross, I always forget his first name. But he actually explained this on the Gettysburg campaign before the battle, of course. He said, my job, I don't think he says the word job. He was smart, wonderful lexicon. But my duty as commander of the army is to place my men in the best position possible, with the best possible advantage and the best concentration of troops in a position where they have the most to gain by victory. After that point, victory is in the hands of my corps commanders and God. And his point is, I can't control affairs. And he's absolutely right. One of the reasons the Federals failed to achieve a great victory at Antietam is because McClellan was arrogantly trying to control the affairs. You can't do that in the Civil War because your communication is through dispatches. It would take, if I want to tell a brigade, turn to your left and fire, I better hope the enemy is still there an hour and a half from now.
Oh, yeah.
You can't do it.
Yeah, I mean, the whole battle would change.
Yeah, you can't do it. All you can do is put your troops in a position where they can do serious harm to the enemy, and they will have the ability to concentrate reinforcements. And at that point, you just shrug your shoulders and say good luck. You have to trust your corps commanders. Your corps commanders have to trust your division commanders. Division commanders have to trust brigade commanders. Ultimately, the Civil War is fought on the brigade level. One of the reasons the Confederates lose Gettysburg is the corps commanders aren't cooperating, whereas the Federal corps commanders are cooperating magnificently. It's a constant exchange of troops. They're always looking for opportunities to help each other. They do a great job.
Hey, how early does this Hood go down in this fight?
Oh, I've already he's done. He's already out. He falls during the attack on Devil's Den.
Yeah,
I skipped him.
I thought he would. Yeah, because the Confederates. I'm trying to remember. They lost a lot of general officers in this battle.
Mm-hmm.
So, where's I'll say it again. General Trimble.
Sorry,
General Trimble. Where's he at on day 2?
General Trimble.
Yeah,
he's doing fuck all. Trimble spends the first day as a supernumerary, which he had been since Second Manassas. Come the second day, he doesn't do anything because he has been placed temporarily in the command of Dorsey Pender's division, but Pender's division doesn't engage on day 2, so he's just chilling.
He was wanting to go. He chased the Army North Division up there. He was trying to get a command. He wanted to go into a fight so bad.
Well, that's exactly.
Trimble was wanting to fight a Bengal tiger.
Yeah, he was a supernumerary. So Trimble was seriously wounded at Second Manassas, and he was promoted to Major General on paper. The problem is there was no post for him. So Lee basically says, "All right, well, come with me anyway," and that's why he's advising Ewell on day 1 because he was.
Yeah, 2 Major General. Okay.
Sorry, I'm enjoying some sun chips. He was attached to the Second Corps as a supernumerary. That is to say, an extra. But after the losses of the first day are tabulated, Lee says, "I've got news for you. There's a division open." And that's how he gets Dorsey Pender's division. Anyway, where were we on the second day attack? Oh, yeah, Cadamus Wilcox. So Wilcox tosses in his Alabama brigade with David Lang's Floridians in tow. Wilcox has, at the start of the attack, he has 1,600. The amount of troops he has at this point is impossible to determine, but it would be somewhere in that area. Wilcox has about 1,300, minus whatever losses he'd accepted at this point. So the combined total is round up to 4,000. It's 3,900, give or take.
Okay.
Hancock sees the attacking force on its way and realizes he doesn't really have any troops left. His artillery is totally exposed. He only has 8 companies of the 1st Minnesota. Of their companies, there are 11 companies in the 1st Minnesota overall. Company L is nominally 1st Minnesota, but it's sharpshooters, so it's actually been detached to the United States sharpshooters. And there are other companies. Company G has been detached for hospital service, and Company H is skirmishing. So there's only 8 companies left that are actually at that point present on the field. And that's all he's got. So at this point, it's one of the legendary moments of the battle. Hancock rides to 1st Minnesota, and he quickly finds Colonel Colville, who commands the 1st Minnesota. And he looks to Colville, and then he points to Wilcox's brigade. And he asks Colville, Colonel, do you see those colors? Colville responds, I do. Hancock responds, then take them. Which is impossible. They're outnumbered 5-1. There are other versions of the story, but that's the one I'm partial to. Now, Colville, according to one memoir of the regimental historian, he said, and I'm sure he's exaggerating, every man knew this order was impossible. That being said, this is a veteran regiment. This regiment, Company D had fought at Ball's Bluffs. Portions of the regiment fought at Williamsburg. The entire regiment had fought at Savage Station. They had fought at Antietam. They weren't heavily engaged at Fredericksburg, but they'd seen a lot of action. They knew what this was about. And they would know enough to know that this order was suicidal. But nevertheless, every man fixed bayonets. Colville launched them forward. Now there's a little dip on Cemetery Ridge. They found the dip, took cover, and launched a volley into the Confederates. Thanks to the fog produced by all the fire, the Confederates couldn't really gauge the number of Minnesotans. Following that volley, they threw themselves into a bayonet charge. That bayonet charge was so ferocious that Wilcox determined they were being attacked by a division.
God.
And so he quickly withdrew. Lang, seeing the withdrawal, withdrew his troops. And so, by this measure, approximately 260-odd federal soldiers were able to push back approximately 4,000.
You think it's some of it with the bayonet charges because it's so psychological?
Oh, usually, especially when you think you're outnumbered. It was an American. There's no other way to put it. It's an American Thermopylae. I forget his name. I'll have to grab his memoir. But one of the men of Company H who was skirmishing, he actually compared directly. Now he wasn't there for the charge, as it happens, because he was one of those lucky companies that missed it. Those are the most interesting memoirs of the 2 companies that missed the battle or missed that charge. But he basically wrote that, like the Spartans of Thermopylae, the enlightened Greeks, we drove back the Asiatic hordes of despotism. And he's calling upon this idea, which is quite valid, that the Confederates were inherently an anti-democratic movement. And he sees America as defenders of democracy. And despite being outnumbered, like the Spartans at Thermopylae, they are driving back the Persians.
Let me say this before I forget. That got me thinking. I was in Afghanistan. One of the 4 operating bases they put us on. There was like a platoon to cover a 7-mile perimeter. There's no way you can cover that.
No.
And they said they took us to this one spot, and they said it was if we ever get overrun, this was the fallback position, and it was like a giant grave, really. And I think it was this first sergeant, or anyway, platoon sergeant. He said, if we ever overran and we're called back here, and you hear the command "fix bayonets," those are the last words you'll ever hear.
Christ, I can't even. I can't even imagine, man. It's nuts. It's fucking nuts.
And they was there, and that's the last words you'll ever hear.
Yeah. And
great.
for a lot of Minnesotans, it was.
Yep.
Of the 8 companies, they will suffer 82%. They will go with about, I can't remember the exact numbers, but I want to say around 260 on, and they end it with about 40.
God.
It's insane. The only regiment that matches them in combat in the Eastern Department is the 1st Texas at Antietam, which suffers 82% losses. The entire regiment, not just 8 companies, and that's why it gets controversial which one counts, because in the case of the 1st Minnesota, 2 companies were detached for different duties, but that's not unusual. As far as I'm concerned, they're tied, 1st Minnesota and 1st Texas.
That's a lot.
It's insane. It's freaking, I don't want to keep dropping the F-bomb. It's freaking crazy. Hancock will say of it quite beautifully that no more gallant a deed was ever achieved by any American force in any battlefield. Because he recognized that the battle essentially saves the federal left. To quote one 1st Minnesota veteran, I think and I love the way he puts it, because this is how the enlisted men, they always put it better. He said, Hancock needed 5 minutes. We gave him 10.
Wow.
Perfect. That's exactly what you did.
I mean, how could you put it any better?
Yeah, it's the American Thermopylae, man.
I forgot. I started going on the site, and people said, "Oh, don't ever go on that site. It's all lost cause stuff." And yeah, there's stuff on there. But when I went on the the Southern Historical Society, I found so many after-action reports from lieutenants and captains and stuff that you would never see out there. I mean, it was just so amazing reading what these guys were. Like I said, it was so much different than hearing what a captain said. His after-action report, first day, second day, third days.
Oh, hello.
Hey, yeah, are you still here? Are you there?
Yeah, can you cut out for a second?
Oh, I said just the primary sources that I found was just so amazing that I never found never read that before, from a captain in the Confederate Army, what happened on day 1, day 2, day 3. So you can find some good stuff on the Southern Historical Society. So I read about the guy, what was the doctor's name, who did the amputations of Jackson and Ewell. He went on a long medical career.
About him sorry, you mean Hunter McGuire?
Yes. They had all his papers on there.
Very good memoirist.
Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to get you off.
That's fine.
Topic there. So if it starts at 11, what time's the last brigade sent in, or the last attack in an echelon like that?
Well, I mean, the problem is I can't answer that because Civil War time doesn't exist. There's a whole book on the concept. It's literally called Civil War time. And and there's no prime meridian that's been established yet. Greenwich time doesn't exist yet, so we don't have time zones. Basically, the time of any particular geographical location is based upon 12 o'clock. When is the sun ultimately directly 90 degrees above us, right? Which means the time in Gettysburg and the time in Harrisburg are different. So there is no way to definitively determine the time because no one's agreed upon what that means. Usually commanders would synchronize their clocks before battle so that they could have some consistency. But even then, Civil War time gets messy. Was Pickett's charge at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock? No idea.
See, that's the same argument I was making the other night in the group when they were saying that the last attack started at 8:30 that night, and I was like, "There's no way that it went."
You can't determine that.
I mean, that's what I said. Who's watching? I said this was this pre-digital. They had stopwatches. We didn't have daylight saving time. I mean,
even when I told you that Longstreet requested to wait from 9 a.m. to 11 for it to enter law. I'm just giving you a speculative time. Right. I couldn't tell you what actually. All I can tell you is he asked for a couple hours of delay. Yeah, Civil War time is a freaking mess. You can do dusk and dawn.
the people I was having a discussion with, they were
Yeah.
thinking this was that time.
Yeah.
I was trying to tell them, no, you can't. It was like you said, was it 1 o'clock, 1:30, 1:45?
It's messy as hell. You have to get someone much smarter than myself to tell you something this complicated. I mean, I can give you the order of battle for Gettysburg. You want to ask what time it was? You got to get someone smarter than me. It's a mess. But speaking of which, are you following the battle so far? Am I making it? Is it making sense?
Yeah, it's making total sense. The international attack's been explained great. I mean, because
It's a good plan in theory.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that Cemetery Ridge was hit the second day.
Yeah, that was the objective. Cemetery Ridge is hit harder on the second than the third, and actually it leads to another one of my favorite Gettysburg quotes. When General Pickett is assigned to take Cemetery Ridge, do you know what Cadmus Wilcox says to him?
No.
This is the same. He commanded the Alabamians, the 1st Minnesota, helped drive back. He will say to Pickett, because he attacks literally the same spot. If you go to Gettysburg, you will find the 1st Minnesota monument less than 300 yards from the Cosma trees. And he'll say to Pickett, the problem isn't getting up there. My boys not got up there yesterday. The problem is when you get there, the whole goddamn federal army is waiting for you in a bunch.
Good Southern accent there.
Thank you. I like to practice it. I love your accent. I really do. Southern accents, Southern and Irish are my two favorites. Beautiful accents. So much character.
One of Jefferson Davis a while back. When he said,
well, thank you, sir. The Jefferson Davis accent is a little more refined.
Well, there's so many different dialects
behind
the Southern accent. I mean, depending on which state you're in,
Hugely. It's a beautifully varied dialect. I genuinely am an admirer. I quite love the accent.
Mine is so much different than, say, the Virginia area, and even different in Texas and Arkansas.
Hugely.
There's so many of them.
Deep South versus bellwether states, massive difference. I mean, hell, there's a part of Virginia, I forget this is an island off Virginia. They still speak with Scottish accents. It's all varied. The Scottish Americans, dare we dream. Anyway, but thank you for the compliment. I really, coming from a Southerner, I really appreciate that. I do work hard on that accent.
Some people try to do it, and I'm like, don't you just, you don't. Well, my friends the other day said you're not even close to Southern accent.
Well, that's because they're doing the cartoon version.
Yeah,
which is not correct. It's irritating.
And that was very that was good. I like that. Oh God,
thank you.
Well,
anyway, that's my version of Wilcox. And he's not wrong. I mean, that is kind of the problem you're facing. But Wilcox comes closer to Pickett to taking Cemetery Ridge, much closer than Pickett did. He nearly pulls it off. And remember, when he's doing this, Anderson's division is attacking the center and Cemetery Hill. And this is where things get discombobulated. So Anderson's division is part of A.P. Hill's corps, but it was transferred to Longstreet's command to the pleasure of both Anderson and Longstreet. Richard Heron Anderson was actually very pro-unionist, very reluctantly fought for the Confederacy. Longstreet was one of the few commanders in the Confederacy that he got along with. Fucking hated Hill. Another F-bomb, sorry. He freaking hated Hill. And he was delighted to be put under Longstreet's command temporarily, and Longstreet was very fond of Anderson. The problem is Anderson's brigade commanders weren't fond of following their orders. So it's Posey, Mahone, and Wright who are making the attack. Mahone decides, I'll start with Mahone. He decides, I've been told I'm in reserve, and that means that I can only attack if ordered. Hold on to that. Posey will find a small number of sharpshooters in a small farmhouse and decide this is the La Haye Sant of Gettysburg. And then Wright is going to, get this, actually attack Cemetery Hill. Who knew?
Really?
With support from Early. Rhodes doesn't show up. And to this day, no one has a good reason as to why. Because Rhodes will die before he gets to write his after action report. For whatever reason, though, he doesn't show up to support the attack, and he really should have. Meanwhile, Stevenson's artillery battery is going to rake roads as he attacks. I think, if I'm getting, hopefully I'm not mixing things up. Sorry, it's a lot of information. Where was I? So, Rand's right is going to get his Tar Heels, and they're actually going to take Cemetery Hill. Between Early and Wright, they're going to drive back the 11 Corps from Cemetery Hill, and Hancock's going to start feeding reinforcements. Lewis Carroll is going to play a particularly important role in this battle. Unfortunately, it's not enough. Now, at this point, Anderson's staff officers are begging Mahone, please help. Mahone's response, I'm in reserve. I must be ordered to move. This is an order from General Anderson telling you to move. I need to hear it from him. What? So Mahone doesn't go forward at all. And little Billy, he's going to make his reputation at the crater. But if I can dare to be critical of little Billy, apparently the man can shoot fish in a barrel. What he can't do is actually fight. Meanwhile, Posey is having his desperate battle against a farmhouse. And Rand's right is asking, where the hell is Posey and Mahone? But nevertheless, between Early and Wright, they are actually breaking through. Now, this is around the same time that Wilcox and Lang are launching their attack. Because remember, it's on echelons, only 15 minutes of differential. This is around the time their attack is developing at Cemetery Ridge. This is the moment. If Wilcox and Lang can smash through Cemetery Ridge, and if Wright and Early can break through Cemetery Hill, you will snap the neck and spine of the Federal Army in one swift stroke. 6th Corps is too far away to help. You can break them now, wipe out 1st and 11th, drive off 2nd and 5th, hold the high ground, and pursue them. Meanwhile, 12th Corps is totally isolated on Culp's Hill. This is the moment. If Lee wins now, he will drive the remnants of the Federal Army into Maryland. And then the reports that the casualties will reach New York. And New York will have a riot that is 10 times larger than New York draft riots we know. All while Pennsylvania and New York are both in the middle of a gubernatorial election where the Copperhead conservatives are winning, both of which who are perfectly willing to elect governments that will directly oppose Lincoln's abolitionist war. What does this mean? The Union loses New York and Pennsylvania for military support. Then you have a massive riot in New York City, and the closest army to suppress that riot is your friendly Army of Northern Virginia, while the rioters scream, God bless Jefferson Davis. And the remainder of the Army of the Potomac, in its shattered form, is driven into Maryland. Holy crap.
See, you've got like you said, they're shattered, driven into Maryland, and the Army of Northern Virginia is roaming free.
It's a really bad day. All of this happens if the rebels can take Cemetery Hill and Cemetery Ridge. But at this moment, and this is the moment where Hancock, during the attack, he looks over at Meade and he sees Meade has literally drawn his sword on Cemetery Hill because Meade fully expects to die on that hill with his army. And then Hancock turns and sees Stannard's brigade at the front of Alpheus Williams' division, 12 Corps, because they've been ordered to leave Culp's Hill and to find the point of battle. Holy crap. And he gives a whoop and he rides them and says, by God, what brigade is this? Sanders Brigade, 1st Vermont. Boys, can you take that battery? And he points to Rand's right. Can you take that battery? And he says, we'll try it, sir. And the Union wins. And Meade says to himself over and over, it's all right now. It's all right now. Now, the Confederates will still launch one last attack on Culp's Hill against only one brigade, outnumbering him 4-1, General Greene. But General Greene, in defiance of Greary's orders, his divisional commander, in defiance of Greary's orders, who actually is his corps commander, because I didn't mention this, but General Slocum, who commands 12 Corps, he just sort of decided during the battle, well, if Hancock's a wing commander, that means I am too. So I command the wing now. General Greery, you'll command the corps. He never runs this by Meade. Meade wasn't aware of this, and also Meade never asked. At the War Council, why are you and Greery here? It just never comes up. But because of this, Greery's commanding the corps, and Greery says, "Dad, don't entrench. Only losers entrench." And Green says, "I'd like to." Well, all right, fine. If you really want to, you pussy. Those entrenchments are going to save the army. Thanks to those entrenchments, Greery's able to commit a fighting retreat and maintain the crest of Culp's Hill. The next day, he'll be reinforced by First Corps. He'll outnumber the Confederates 3-1, and he'll save the Federal right flank. And that is the second day at Gettysburg, in short.
I mean, I enjoyed listening to that very much. I know some great synopsis there at the end.
Thank you.
Broken Army and Lee running free, riots in New York, Pennsylvania countryside scared to death.
It would really suck. If like me, you are very pro-union, this would suck. Like it's not great.
I mean, I can see it. I mean, it's the only army there to suppress the riots.
It's the Army of Virginia. Oh, good. Meanwhile, the rioters are screaming, "Hurrah for Jeff Davis!" Oh, I wonder how this is gonna go. This is great. Oh boy. Like we're all gonna die. I mean, it's a bloody disaster.
What if something like that happens? I mean, the army's shattered. They've lost obviously confidence in Meade. How does Lincoln try to hold this together?
I don't know.
I mean, you have no army, you have no commanders. The people are against you.
I mean, have you tried praying? Like, I honestly, I don't know. I think he's screwed. I don't really see a way out of this. To be perfectly honest, I don't see a way out of this. For Lincoln.
Does he just say, "That's it"? I can't hold this together.
I mean, he would try. What he would probably do is he'd probably try to do what he did in Ohio. Now, Burnside did that without his permission. This time, he would authorize a suspension of habeas corpus in order to. But then, problem is the Democratic candidates had so much broad support. But out of desperation, he'd probably try to pull a Vallandigham on them. But in two populous states, right for the gubernatorial, that might not work.
I mean, could you have a coup replacing Lincoln? I mean, you still got McClellan there.
Oh, for sure you could. No, it's a nightmare situation. As Lincoln said about these gubernatorial elections before Gettysburg, he said, "I am more anxious as to the results of these elections than I was the election of 1860."
Oh yeah, I can. Yeah, by far.
Yeah, the whole thing rested on it. It's a disaster. It's a nightmare. And as for what Lincoln does, I mean, well, I'm not as smart as Lincoln, so he might have resorted to moving in federal troops to ensure the application of the draft. But I mean, he had to do that when he won at Gettysburg. How many troops does he have to move in if he loses?
That's that's a whole interesting what if there.
If I may, to quote the greatest philosophical film ever made, Alien or Aliens, it's a bug hunt. It's a freaking bug hunt, man. We're screwed. It would have been really bad. That's my point.
I mean, because they're already up in nervous enough when Lee's army marching through Pennsylvania. The Stuarts riding the countryside. Meade's new command.
Well, the Confederates will take Harrisburg next, which was their original goal. So they get the capital of Pennsylvania, and then the Copperheads win in Pennsylvania, and then it's really bad. If you want the Union to win, if like me, you're not a huge fan of slavery, this is bad. It's so bad.
I mean, that whole thing was a recipe for disaster for him. I mean, the way it was set up. The commander leaves fresh off of victory, and Chancellorsville, his army's confidence is riding high. They can't be defeated.
Yeah. And I mean, at that point, the providence and fortuity, serendipity itself is inherently a fickle thing. But the cards are stacked for the Confederates if they take Gettysburg on the second day.
It would be safer to say that Gettysburg was not the pivotal battle for the North, but it was for the South in terms of winning.
Precisely. The way I like to frame it is, and this is just my interpretation, but the Union does not win the Civil War at Gettysburg. What it does is it doesn't lose the Civil War at Gettysburg. And to quote one of my favorite war films, Dunkirk, that's enough.
That was, I mean, that was great. I guess, I'm sure thing we'll ever do next time.
For sure.
I wouldn't stop that one now because that was, I'll tell you, I've got